Hi, everybody. I'm David Anderson. This is the, what is this? The January 15th, 2023 meeting of the Timex Sinclair online user group. This is our third big year of meetings. And this year's gonna be bigger than ever, just because it's gonna be bigger than ever. No, we're gonna have guests. We're gonna get organized. We're not gonna run this like an amateur hour like we've done in the past few years. People are gonna sign up. More people are going to join us. These are all the things that I predict for this year. Anyway, Tim Swenson is a long time Sinclair QL user. He was a short time 1000 user, and even shorter 2068 user because it crapped out on him. But he used the QL for a very long time and has continued to use QL emulators. So Tim is going to give us a demo of what Sinclair QL emulators look like and what you can do with them. And then after that, Jeff Burrell is going to give us an update on his FPGA project to replace the video output of the 2068 by emulating the SCLD, which is a pretty cool thing because it allows adding on additional features. And I'll let Jeff get deeper into that after Tim. And then after Jeff and Tim, we will have an open chat. And Gustavo has already teased us with some very interesting information about how many 2068s made it to Argentina, which is a thing that just fascinates me to no end. All right, so with that,
actually, before there's one other thing you left out.
Yeah.
You said you were going to give us also an update on the tape archiving.
Oh, well, okay, yes. Yeah. I'll go last if there's time. Okay, it's a very interesting process, to say the least. It's cool. It's cool. Yeah, I'll give an update. I've got so many tapes now. Tim, are you ready?
So, actually, before sharing the desktop, so I'm supposed to know I'm logged in twice, one video, one without, because my desktop does have video. But before switching to my desktop on the other machine, this I want to show. I don't have a QL. I got rid of mine some years back, but this is what your first software came with.
Little folding booklet with some. Yep. Oh my God, it's so small. I thought it was bigger.
No. And these, I'm going to do it such the light is right, is the microdrive cartridges. And you can see this one says database.
Nice.
And then basically it comes out and there's your stringy floppy.
Wow. That is really, really small, like smaller than a matchbox.
Yeah, the nice thing I liked about these was you can drop them, you can put them in your pocket with change, your keys, because it's a hard shell plastic.
Yeah.
So another thing I liked about them was the QL when I bought it was $300. If you had something like a Commodore 64 or something like that, just getting a floppy disk was like $100 to $150 for one. Now, it was more efficient. I mean, it was cheaper to use, and they weren't bad. They're $100K per tape. So, all right, let's go ahead and I'll share my desktop.
I'm gonna try to keep up with you.
Question. Is compatible with the Spectrum microdrive or not? No, different.
The microdrives themselves are physically, you could put one in it, put one in the Spectrum, one in the QL, but the writing format was physically different. So if you had a blank one, it would work in either machine. Just when you formatted it, at that point you can no longer to do it. It's like putting an 8-track into a VHS kind of thing. All right, let me go ahead and bring up this emulator. I'm going to make it a little bit larger for those that can see. For those that don't know, there are basically two types of QL emulators.
Tim, before you start talking about the emulators, could you give like a 2-minute introduction to people who've never used a QL or don't know anything about it?
Sure. Let me go bring this picture up. This is what a QL looks like. This is a QL Vision monitor, which I used to have. There's the QL. It's a foot long, about the size of a regular keyboard. On your right are the two microdrive cartridges, and you see this microdrive installed. Of course, there's the power brick in the back. On the back end, so the left-hand side is an expander for adding additional boards. Right-hand side is an expander for adding additional microdrives, but none were ever produced. In the back, you've got power, you've got video, you've got composite video, also RGB. You also have two serial ports, two joystick ports, and two network ports. The networks ran on kind of like a coordinates, like a stereo headphone jack type connector, and you could plug in multiple QLs in a network. At a show back in Washington, DC, we had like 4 QLs, and then one of them had a floppy drive. And so you can have any one of those QLs access the floppy drive on the 4th one. And then when you did, if you all did the same time, it would queue up, and whoever got in first accessed the file. Then the next guy would access the file, and so on until everyone's able to access the files.
In order for that to work, what were they, daisy chained or something?
Yeah, you ran from one QL to another, then from that one. So you had 2 ports. So one was essentially in and out. So you would plug in from one, then out to the other guy, and daisy chain them. I don't know what the limitation was. It might have been like an 8-bit, so like 255 or something like that. It was something no one ever really would use. So
did the QL have a modem?
There were a number of people did get modems. I had one myself. I think my first one was an acoustic modem, and the fun part was the telephone I had was a Princess handset. We know what a Princess handset was?
Impossible to use with a telephone modem.
Yes, I was able to do it because I would be very quiet. I said it as close as I could, but if I sneezed, I would get logged off. So, all right, so let's go back. So while we're looking at this, the QL came out in 1983. It was announced, I can't remember the time it was announced, and it wasn't quite ready for prime time. They went through multiple ROMs. So the last ROM was called the JS, and then in the US we had the JSU. Thorn EMI built the machines in the UK. When they came out with US ones, they went to Samsung and Korea. Microdrives were known to have all kinds of problems until Samsung took over. So the American people complained in UK about all kinds of problems. The Americans get our QLs and they're rock solid because they're built by somebody else. So American QLs are quite good. This is what we call a BBQL, a black box QL, standard machine, 128K. The developer of the operating system, once it shipped out the door, kept adding things to it. So there's this concept of toolkits that add additional features to the language, to the machine. So later, he rewrote an entire new operating system called SMSQ/E. You could get it running on a regular QL, but you also had a number of emulators that picked up that operating system. So your 2 primary emulators are either going to emulate the base QL or they're going to emulate SMSQE. Biggest difference is base QL said, oh, screen memory is here, does not move. SMSQE, screen memory moves. So if you have something written for a base QL and assumes screen memory is in a location, it will not run on the other operating system. So with that said, that's why I'm going to first bring up SQLUX. It's QL for Unix. What you're seeing here is my own personal boot. So let me just do it. So let's also talk about how this works. White screen is window 2, red screen is window 1, window 0 is where you type things in. Your basic and your operating system commands are exactly the same. So let's do here 10 print test. So notice listen in the white screen. If I say run, it shows up on the red screen. I can also say 10 print number 0 test. Now it's printing down on window number 0. So I can define which window it's going to go to. But by default, it says, oh, number 1, the red one's where your stuff's going to be at. All right. I also want to show. So I mentioned the tool thing, the add-ons. There's something called tool. Well, I should still just do this before I get into that. So now I have a procedure called foo, so I could go sub. But the nice thing is when you type procedures and functions, they're added to the name table in the system. So if I just type foo, it runs as if I've got another command at the operating system.
Like forth.
So you also have, let's see, if I do extras, this is a command that lists all the extra, the basis and name table list. And so if I go load the boot program, let's go list, you'll see that I'm like at line 310, I'm loading some, so lresper means to load and basically loads in the memory. You can load these bin files and they become extra commands. A popular one that everyone used was called toolkit 2. It was one of the first of these actions. So on my boot is I load all these different features, different signal extensions, and so on from the base QL.
Tim,
yeah.
at the risk of insulting you now, do these lresper programs operate somewhat like the old TSRs did during the DOS days, where you could expand the OS? Okay.
What you basically do is you're taking an basically a binary assembly, compiled program. When you lresper it, it basically looks at the binary, knows what's code, and then knows that, oh, here's the extra commands I'm supposed to add to the name table list.
Okay.
So you have to build it for that to be a toolkit. It's just not like you're not like building another executable. You're building a special toolkit.
That's a powerful function.
It basically allows, so since this is ROM based, it allows you to extend your ROM, add new features, new capability without having to change the ROM. With 128K in memory, you've got plenty of space. Plus, most people expanded their QLs, so you have plenty of memory for this sort of stuff. Now, of course, another thing that QL has that the earlier machines didn't have is file system. And what I'm doing now is saying that wildcard directory, window 1, win1. Your devices were Win for a Winchester drive. You had MDV for microdrive, FLP for floppy. Those, if you're seeing here, is those angle brackets, well, greater than sign, whatever, that actually defining a directory. So there I can say, oh, what's inside that directory. Just so you know, there is no .com, whatever. Everything's an underscore. There is no periods allowed in when you're writing files. Everything's an underscore. So the first one, BT underscore ENV underscore bin, its real path name is win1 underscore BT underscore ENV underscore bin. So that's so. Also, how this is working is, because I'm running an emulator, there's something called a QXL file, because it was the firstly defined with a tool called QXL or hardware. It is a virtual disk. It is a 1 to whatever meg file on disk that to the QL looks like a bunch of files, but to the operating system, it's just one big file. So you can have multiple hard drives, quote unquote hard drives for the QL and the different emulators by just having these multiple QXL files. All right.
Tim, back in the 80s or when you were using the system, did you have a hard drive?
Eventually I did. I primarily initially ran off of microdrives. Then I got a floppy, ran off floppy for a bit. And then, that was 5 1/4, then went to 3.5 floppies. There was also something called the ROM disk. It was flash RAM that plugged into the ROM slot of the back of the device. So Now you've got like a USB thumb drive you can put in and maybe make that a bootable or something. That's what the ROM disk was. It was a flash drive you put in the back, and it knew how to basically be the boot. So when you boot up a QL, it looks for a file called boot on whichever device you've got. Defaults to MDV1, but with hardware add-ons like the ROM disk, it knew to tell the QL, no, boot on me, on the device. And so with the emulators, you can define where you want to boot from. And for SQLux, I've defined it to boot from Win1. So now I want to show you. So one thing about SQLux, one thing I like about SQLux is it recently has a speed option. So let me go ahead and close this real quick. I need to go make a change. Yep. I need to, here's where I define what the devices are, the hard drives, and I need to uncomment this option, speed option. If you run the emulator, it runs as fast as possible. Well, that's not so great if you're running a program that requires it's speed based. So let me show you this. Just so you know, that Minerva thing, that's actually an additional ROM that people get. All right, now if I do, I'll run in boot. Oh, okay, there it is. This is actually the first program I ever bought for the QL. Let's go demo mode. If I hadn't turned that speed option on, this would be running incredibly fast. You wouldn't be able to play it because it would be zipping through. So in the last, I don't know, a few months, someone actually added a feature to the software to slow it down. So if I go ask you want to play the game, I can actually start doing it. And of course, I'm gonna hit him and I'm dead. So that's the one neat feature that recently came out with SQLux I really like. All right,
and Tim,
let's go over.
Was all the software released on the microdrive cassettes then, or?
Everything, yes. Later, as floppy became more predominant, things were available on microdrive and on floppies. But after a while, microdrives got rather expensive. They were not cheap to make, and so the cost went up. They would be, you know, a couple of bucks. It's like the early days of floppies where you wouldn't buy a pack of 10 for $20. You'd buy one or two. So the cost did go up, and then eventually people did transition to floppies. 5 1/4 were not common. It was mostly 3 1/2. A lot of people went to 3 1/2. I went to 5 1/4 because I got a hold of a 5 1/4 for free. It was an old 360 that someone was tossing out. And you also had to basically build your own case for the floppy drive. You didn't power it from the QL. You powered it, had a separate power supply for the floppy drive. That was interesting, to go into a computer store and try and find a separate power supply and container for a floppy. So, all right. So let's go look at SMSQE. This is another emulator called SMSQ emulator. It's not a QDOS emulator. It's designed to run SMSQE. So it has all of the extra features usually built in. There's my typical boot program. This is actually runs on Java. So SQLux is written in C, and you basically have to compile it yourself. For SMSQ emulator, it's written in Java, and you basically download it, runs in Java. It also has, I mean, I could run on SQLux, but also have what we call the pointer environment. Let's see here. Where is my? I want to do. if you need to run an executable, you have to type an exec. You couldn't type an executable in and have it go look on disk like DOS does. Everything you type in the command line here has to be in the name table. So if you want to run executable, you have to say exec, which is in the name table. Now, Tony Tubby, who wrote the operating system, wrote all the extras, wrote the pointer environment. This is basically a desktop without a desktop. There is no actual background desktop, but you can actually run programs that are true GUI programs. Let's see here. Probably die in a second. Yep. And notice that the cursor can change too. And then when you move out here, that means it's locked. Back to your program. There is your cursor because it's changed. I'll hit escape and start all over again. Okay. Oh, I exited.
Was that actually a release program, or was that like a third party something that came
This
out
was
later?
open source.
Okay.
There were a lot of people, there was a lot of pointer environment programs. You developed them either pure in assembly or you developed them in BASIC. There was a toolkit you could buy that helped you produce it in BASIC. But the whole operating system was based on assembly. Everything was designed to be written in assembly. So a lot of the nicer words or text editors written in assembly, a lot of that sort of stuff. One thing I want to show is the operating system is single user multitasking. Oops. Notice that I now have, so everything has a job number, a tag number, an owner, and a priority. And then here so I've got the hotkey systems running. There's minefield. So if I go Control C, I can swap back and forth. So let me do this. Let's say I need to run editor.
Tim, do you know whether this was cooperative multitasking or preemptive?
I'm not too sure.
It was preemptive.
What's the definition?
Well, preemptive.
Was, yeah.
Oh, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You said it was preemptive.
Yeah. In other words, many tasks can run at the same time with the priorities on each of them.
But the OS would interrupt the processes to let others run.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's not up to the task to give access to another one. It's the OS that does it.
Okay.
Only downside was updating the screen for hidden jobs. That was an issue. So right now I'm in an editor. I can swap over to Minefield, back to the operating system, jobs. I now see I have Minefield and QED running, and back and forth. So it was, for me, what I would do was I would always have my edit, if I'm programming, I had my editor up and running. I get back to the OS, do the compile or do whatever, do some testing. Oh, I need to make a change. Just switch back to my editor, play with it, and then back to whatever I need to do, and just keep cycling through the Control C to get to the different applications. So that was it. And those, another thing here, let's do this. Copy Win1. I think we got boot 2. Boot. So RAM1 is actually a RAM disk. This has a built-in, but there were utilities with the bare bones QL you had. So if you bought something like the gold card, or you had extra memory, better, faster CPU, but with the extra memory, you could use that memory for files. So instead of constantly writing to a floppy and the same sector as you get into your word processor, you add a few new lines, okay, you get out, you want to compile. Instead of going to a floppy drive, you just do everything in RAM. And that way nothing's really overwriting your floppy. And then when you're done for your programming session, you just copy everything back from RAM to floppy. So a lot of times if I'm unzipping stuff. I'll unzip it to RAM first and then figure out what I want to do with it, or play with it and then go, fine, I'm done. I don't need to put it anywhere. So I also want to show you is with this emulator, there is a config option, lots of config options, but I want to look at basically, so here I've actually got 3 different hard drives. That's my primary boot. And then each project I create a WIN file for. So there's one called life and one called sound. And I can add additional, if I say here, go here, I can then scroll through and pick other these WIN files. I can also, there are other devices besides Windows. I can go to NFA, that is for native file something. So this actually is a directory on my system. So I can now access and get files to and from Linux to this. I also have, you guys know what a floppy is. So you can basically take a QL floppy, put it in a Linux box, run DB against it, and create an image file. And then what you do then is you go in here, fit devices, go to floppy, and then you can, oh, I actually do have one there. And you basically use it as an image file. And if I do WDIR FLP, there's my files that are on a floppy. You can probably write to it. I use the floppies just as a way of getting stuff off of floppy onto the QL, into the emulators. I do not write back to them. And that's with DD, you could write back to the original floppy, but I've never tried that. So,
Tim, I noticed you have a program there called Pawn. Is that like the Pawn game that was later turned into like a
I think so.
adventure?
I think I was trying it out. I think I've got a disk flop file. But let me go do one thing I've done recently. I'll spell it right to kind of show graphics on the QL. So I'm going to the second hard drive and running. Oh, spell it right. All right. Hit. You guys all know John Conway's Life. Obviously, should know that. Now, this is actually written in C, compiled, so this is about as fast as it's going to go. And of course, the emulator is fast based upon my whatever CPU I've got. Faster CPU, faster emulator.
That's faster than a 1000.
Yeah, although assembly, but it is 512 by 256.
Yeah, you've got a big field there.
So it's 512 by 256. The QL will go higher res. I'll also, okay, let me do this. So actually, no, I want to unpause it, exit. This mode is 4 color. The standard QL did 8 colors and 4 colors. When I showed you that game, that was in 8 color, 256 by 256. But with the emulators, they allow a higher resolution. So let me think if I've got, it's been a while since I've done it. You can actually do 24-bit color. Let's do config here. Window mode. That's okay. There's a way of setting the color mode. There we go. So you can do QL colors, 8-bit colors, and 16-bit. See, it says 8-bit colors Aurora. Aurora was, so when you've got the basic QL, you'd buy something called the gold card, super gold card. That was an add-on, gave you additional memory, floppy drive interface, and it gave you a faster CPU. Well, after a while, motherboards were getting kind of old. So someone said, well, gee, if I take the gold card and then I build something called the Aurora, I no longer need the base QL. I can take the gold card, the Aurora, put them together. Now I have a whole new system running a whole lot faster. And it had better graphics. So, but I've got it set for 16-bit colors, but rarely use it. I'm trying to think if I've got, how do I load in? Oh, I think I know what to do. Go ahead.
There were folks who ended up building their own sort of QLs inside of, IBM clone boxes, right?
Yeah. The Aurora card plus the gold card, you can throw it in. There's also a couple clones called the Q40 and the Q60.
Oh.
They were ATX mini motherboards that would fit into a standard desktop, but they were basically the Aurora and the gold card in one single board. Also had the Thor, an early emulator, compatible system that the CST Thor, which came out of Denmark. That was like 86, 87. I want to say 1997, 98 was the Q40, the Q60. Now there's the Q68, which is a smaller form factor hardware compatible system, which I don't get into because I don't really like hardware. I like the fact that I can run multiple emulators at once. So
Tim, did you say now there's one? So there's actually someone who's making a clone currently?
Yeah, the C68, it's been out for a number of years. I don't know if you can buy it right now, but I think the guy may be looking at building some more or doing something, a newer version of it. So I don't know if you wanted to buy one right now, if you could get one or not. You could get one, of course, used. You can buy almost everything QL-wise on eBay. The prices are kind of steep. Almost all of them come from the UK. If you wanted to buy one, I would recommend getting a US-based system. It runs better. It's physically built better. It runs better. It's designed to run in the US. The British use a British Telecom connector for serial ports. The US version uses the standard 9-pin D. Much better to get the US one of the rigmarole, but I don't know how much, ones you may find online may be British based because they're being sold in the UK. That's where the primary, I would say 80% of the QL users were in the UK, and then some in Europe, some in the US, some all over the other places, but primarily 80% like in the UK. If you wanted to go to a computer show, you went to the UK. There were some computer shows in the US. I went to a number of them, even hosted one myself. And you were lucky to have maybe 60 people there at a QL show. And this would be like a nationwide type show.
And Tim, you used to, at some point apparently, distribute a version of small C.
I really didn't distribute so much as I got a hold of it, played with it, and then tinkered with it and wrote a document on using it. So
I say this because it's available on eBay right now.
Yeah, I saw that. Something I sent out something a while back to a number of people, and someone picked it up and thinks, "Oh, this is really rare." Yeah, it's not. It's just so I was trying to also encourage other people to use it. So at the time, C68 really hadn't come out yet. C68 is an ANSI C compiler for the QL. It'll do pointer-based programs like this. You can actually use it to write this. So this program is either written in assembly or C68. Well, it might have been basic, one of the three. But there were other C compilers. Small C was the first one to come out. It later became Digital Precision, later bought the small C compiler from the author, made a conversion version. Another called GST QC came out based on small C. Biggest difference between C and small C is small C didn't do floating point, didn't do two-dimensional arrays, did not do structures, but it was neat to play around with. And then eventually C68 came out, and then some of the other compilers came out, got released as freeware. Almost all compilers are now available. There's Fortran, there's 2 Pascals. You can get Perl for the QL, APL. I don't know if I've ever tried that one before. Lisp, there's a number of lists. There's a Prolog. Some of those were not. There was one GST Prolog came out as commercial. Another one that wasn't commercial. So there's lots of different programming languages, but primarily what people are doing is they're going to write BASIC, because there's 2 compilers, QLiberator and Turbo. Both were commercial, both are now free. Turbo was the first one to go free. That QLater eventually became free, some like 10 years after Turbo. I helped with the Turbo project by taking all of the documentation that Simon Goodwin had and then cleaning up, sprucing up, and making it look better. That was probably 2000, 2001 when I did that, because I was still at SGI. And then, of course, so BASIC is popular, and C68 is the other one, or an assembly. Some of the authors just write pure assembly. As far as other emulators, there is a Q emulator written by a guy in Seattle. It is QDOS only. And then there is QPC2, which is for Windows, was commercial, is now freeware. It is also an SMSQ emulator. It will not run some of the very early QL programs. So that QL CAD runs I was showing would not run on that one, will not run on this emulator. It has to be a QL, not SMSQ emulator, for that to run well. Just because of the differences.
Tim, just let you know, Q emulator is also available for the Mac and Windows.
Yes. I think it was originally from the Mac and then came out for Windows. Daniel, I think, was a big Mac guy. But I think it is still technically commercial. I think you have to buy a license from him still. So it's really the last commercial of the emulators.
Just to let you know, I installed it recently on my Mac, and it says that the license is free until he decides to change his mind. So right now it's.
Oh, okay. I bought mine 15, 20 years ago, maybe a little bit, yeah, about that, years ago. So, and I don't have, I think so I'm on a newer desktop. I don't think I've really installed Wine on here. So I haven't tried it, nor have I tried QPC2. This emulator and SQLux pretty much do everything I need QL wise. Fast enough. I have a small little netbook that also works relatively well. Oh, one thing I didn't discuss, let's just do this. One neat feature of the QL, as I mentioned and showed you those microdrives, the QL came with 4 basic programs. There was a database, spreadsheet, word processor, business graphics that were actually called Archive, Abacus, Quill, and Easel. They came with 4 separate. They eventually got merged into one thing called Exchange. So here I can go into Quill, give it a name, and there's a word processor. And then you can do F6. Let's go to Abacus. And now I can type in a spreadsheet, F6, back to Quill. I'm in my word processor.
Wow.
So, but I can still task swap between the other things. And if I do jobs, you're going to see that I've got Minefield running, QED, the editor, and Exchange running. I think, let's go in here. Let's go F6. Let's
now,
change
Tim,
over to 2.
In order to do that, Tim, do you have a memory expansion, or are you just running on a bog standard 128 system?
No. Actually, this was running about 8 meg.
8 megabytes?
Yeah.
Oh,
emulator,
okay.
I would not. So running a bare bones QL with no extra memory and nothing else is like running DOS 2 or running Windows 2. It ain't gonna cut it. You can't really do anything on it. You can do a few things on it, but you really need to expand it. And with emulators, the emulators just automatically expand.
The base QL was 128K.
Yes, at the time that was a lot because Commodore 64 was 64K, the Commodore 120 was 128K, the Mac was 128K when it first came out. That seemed a lot, but of course now no one's running a Mac with 128K. So I think I've got this one set for. Let me go to config here. Config. You also this one it does do multi languages. Where is memory? Memory set memory size, and I've got set, but default is set to 8 meg. But I've got, I don't know how many gig of memory here, so 8 meg is not a whole lot. Barely takes up any space.
What is the resolution of the screen?
Say that once again.
the resolution of the screen at the moment? How
Oh,
many?
on the desktop, or are you talking about the QL?
No, in the QL emulation.
It's 512 by 256.
Oh.
It will go higher. So what I've done with this particular emulator is I told it to double up because my poor eyes, I never run anything higher than 512 by 256 because it looks so small to me. But I could actually run it, and then what you do, so if you run it higher resolution, you get this red, white, and black in the upper left-hand corner. And the rest of the screen is only usable by pointer environment programs because you can move them around the default screen. So I don't really use the higher res. It's possible, but I like the original 512 because it's easier on my eyes. So
you mainly use it in this sort of command line, semi-command line mode?
Yep, there is desktops you can do. One of them, which I used to use, was called Cascade. Only talking about what a button frame is. A button. Notice this little sleep thing here. Okay, because let's move this. Move them up here. Now, if I go sleep, that is called a button. So what you can do is you can have a number of point environment programs sleeping on your desktop, and they can be all across the top. And you want to go bring, it's like, you know how down here I can go and bring up this thing. All this stuff down here is stuff that I've set aside in Unix, Linux, or Windows. This is the equivalent to set aside in pointer environment, getting it to sleep. So there was one called Cascade. It normally sleeps upper left-hand corner. When you clicked on it, it would come up. Oops. It would come up, and it was nothing more than a drop down of programs. You'd say you just do it like a start menu in a way. It was the inverse start menu, came down instead of up. And the guy Jonathan Hudson wrote it years ago. He also wrote a ton of stuff, very complex. He wrote a voicemail system for the QL, email, that sort of stuff. And he wrote this off the cuff, stupid little start menu thing. And that's what everyone liked. No one really wanted the voicemail system he created, where you could actually dial into a QL, leave a voicemail, and then listen to it. Very complex, but everyone liked Cascade. The other one they liked was a Google Eyes thing, where you move your mouse and the eyes would follow the mouse wherever it was. Just a off-the-cuff graphics, but that was also popular. So he was not a happy camper about that.
So Tim, back in the 90s and maybe the 80s, did you have much dealing with the folks in the states who were supporting the QL? Like, for instance, there was this guy in New Hampshire, Bill Cable, who had a company,
Rindenwood Computing.
Yeah, and he wrote like these extensions to that database program to
archive.
Yeah,
yep.
To do all kinds of crazy things.
Yep, I met Bill. I have probably met most of the US-based QLers, especially commercial folks. I actually rode with Paul Holmgren on a drive from, he was in Indianapolis, picked me up in Dayton. We drove to Rhode Island one time, straight through, no stopping except for gas. I went over to England once, met a number of QLers over there. They had a US QL show in the East Coast. And I said, well, gee, let me see if I can organize one on the West Coast. I did that in 1998. And somewhere I've got a picture. You remember who Simon Goodwin is, or Tony Frischman?
Simon Goodwin rings a bell.
Simon did the compilers, Turbo, and he did Zip compiler for the Spectrum.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Then there's also Tony Frischman was Miracle Systems. No, he was TF Services. Stuart Honeyball was Miracle Systems. He did the gold card. I got a picture of myself, Tony Frischman, and Simon in my hot tub. Marcel Kilgus, who wrote QPC and is now one of the maintainers of the operating system, SMSQE, was also, a lot of them they flew to the East Coast show I think what Simon did was he bought a ticket to San Francisco with a long-term layover in New Jersey. So he'd fly from London to New Jersey, stayed a couple of days for that QL show, flew to San Francisco, stayed here for a couple of days for the QL show, and then basically straight back.
Wow.
So I met most of them. Bill Cable, I met him. I met his wife, his son, Rigel. Phobos Dokis, I mean, it was like the Greek guy. I met him. Ernst Koenig was I think the last one. Well, Ernst Koenig was in Switzerland, did COO as a company. He is big into preservation, archiving QL stuff. I met him. He was over here about 5 years ago, and he came over to where in Sunnyvale. And I was working there. We had dinner together. The guy so SQLux back in late 90s, UQLX was created. It seemed to be okay. It sat dead for about 15 years. Graham, what's his last name? Oh, I can't remember all of a sudden, but he was out of Scotland, picked it up, converted it, reworked it, got it to run with SDL, and now it's much better. Some people contributed, so it's a lot fresh and alive. SMSQ emulator is still relatively alive. It gets updated about once a year. It's still it's fairly mature. So those are still kind of going on strong. There is a QL bulletin board, QL the forums. We meet on chat. If you see this chat here, there we go. This is the chat. Some are on people that say the QL bot. They are on Discord. I'm actually logged in directly. If you really want to try it, there is a QL IRC client that you run on one of these emulators and get into the chat. It was written mostly by a gentleman by Dilwyn in Wales, but I actually created the framework of it as a test version. He really, really liked it, and he fleshed it out totally. So I did the framework, and he built the rest of the house. So I give him most of the credit, but I just did a proof of concept to where you could actually join that chat room from the QL. That's really because both emulators have hooks into the underlying networking of the whatever operating system you're running, Windows or Linux. So when there's even a version of Lynx, LYNX, the text-only web browser you can run. So
Tim, yep. which one would you which two emulators would you recommend for somebody who's new to this and wants to learn the QL
I think SMSQ emulator is probably the best. You won't run all the programs, but you can run most because SQLux you have to compile it yourself. So SMSQ emulator, Java based, make sure you've got Java installed and just run it. I'd recommend getting hold of a QXL Win file. I think I've got one running around that I could give the folks. I think I built one also for SQLux because you need like the Mac, the QL executable has extra stuff attached to it in a header. If you take a Mac, at least an old Mac binary, copy it to DOS directory, DOS machine, and then brought it back, it wouldn't run anymore because you lost that header information. The same thing with the QL is you have to have that header information. So the best way to get files back and forth between different systems is you put everything to a zip file, which includes the header, you transfer it via DOS or whatever, then you unzip it on a QL and that header style stuff comes back. And so having a binary, a virtual hard drive with zip already running, you don't need to do anything funny, get zip to run and then get all your stuff. So if somebody wants to run these emulators, contact me. I've got a 1 meg QXL file I can send out, has basically almost everything boot wise. Let me get out here. Let's do. I think I've got Turbo installed. Oh, let me demo one thing here. One thing the biggest thing I'm known for in the QL world is this. I don't like adding line numbers to programs. I learned Pascal in college. let's do something like here. I like spaces in between things. So let's do this. Let's go F3 SA.
You need to say put that as a next instead of next, I think.
Oh, you're right. Okay, let me just. Oh, you're right. Let me let's back to state. All right. Now F3 save slash RAM1 test. Oh, SSB. Oh, F3 is it SA. RAM1. There we go. All right. So let's get rid of this. Okay, let's go also get rid of this. Quick. Okay, so this will not run on the QL, but RAM1 test. It's going to default to RAM1 test basic. Pick the defaults. Now, if I say view RAM1 test, there it is. This is a extremely simple demo, but what my SSB is structured super basic. It's a preprocessor for basic that allows a number of things. One, it allows you to write code that doesn't have line numbers. You have spaces in between sections of code. It also does conditional compilation. So if I said if def something, it may or may not include that part of the code into the resultant code. There are two types of marks that are put in, marks that are left out. You also can do an include statement. So you can have you can break up your basic into multiple files. When you run it through, it will include all the files. Which also means that you can then run it through make. You can basically take your basic programs and use make program to then create a basic version of it, and then you can compile and run or do whatever. I really got tired after about line numbers. I got tired of using the old style of Sinclair coding. You know, after doing Pascal and then learning C, I really like structured programming. And so super basic is structured. The only downfall was it required line numbers. And so by doing this preprocessor, I could code how I liked to do it. And what you used to see a lot in programs was something like this, which I'll just type something. All right. They would do this colon part, and that was how they would make space in between line numbers. I'm like, that's just kind of ugly. But that was the old traditional way. And I had a gentleman, the one guy, Dylan, who was doing the IRC client. I gave him my original code. He said, okay, I'll try your structured super basic. But he kept putting colons in for space. Like, Dylan, don't do it. Just add spaces. But he couldn't. His brain was so wired that he had to have colons there. Because, you know, you can do 40, let x equal 1, colon, let y equal 2. A single, okay, then you list a single colon is valid in a line. So that was their way of adding additional spacing to make it look nice. I'm like, oh, I just sorry, but that's having done college for programming, just didn't really look nice. So that's why I preferred having it looking like this, where there's actual space.
You Pascalified it.
And if you notice, RAM1. Indentation is also included. You can't indent with super basic. So with structured super basic, it leaves the indentation in. A lot of people wouldn't indent in super basic because they were Spectrum programmers where there wasn't indentation. And looking at that is just kind of horrible. So it does leave the indentation back in. So,
Tim, I have a question that you haven't covered yet. I thought maybe you'd cover at the very beginning, but in my 20-minute experience with the QL yesterday, I was I noticed that when you turn the system on your system today, it didn't do this, which was it asked for composite or what is it, RGB?
All right.
Like, can you
Let's go
explain
back
that to me?
Let me go exit the simulator. Let me go back to this one again and watch. You see it right there? And disappeared. So most emulators have found that hitting the F1, F2 is a pain in the you know what. So there's a way of disabling that, or just assuming it's going to be F1 for monitor, because no one does TV anymore. Again, let me.
Did they have the same resolutions, or not?
No. So TV was 40 column versus 80 column on the monitor.
Yeah.
Okay. It was. So let me just actually see if let me just fire this up again, and let's see if I can get. Yep, it's not taking it. Okay. It is much smaller. And the only reason it did a TV mode because people weren't buying the QL monitor, RGB monitors, because they were rather expensive. If you go back to here, so excuse me, when I bought mine, so the list price of the QL was $500, $499 or something like that. Or in the US, it was like $399, 399 pounds in the UK. So it's $500 for just the base system. 2 years later, actually about a year after it came out in the US, it got dropped down to $299. So when I went to Sun Electronics in San Francisco, I bought the QL. I bought for $300. The monitor was $300, and the Shikosha near letter quality printer was $300. And if you bought all three, you could get $50 off. So I bought everything for $850. And so the monitor was $300, is the same price as the QL. So it was not a cheap monitor. And this is the exact same monitor I had. It was a great monitor. You remember the Commodore 64 days? You had a Commodore monitor. You turn if you print all black, and then you turn up the brightness, you would see this kind of fuzzy gray. On this monitor, if you turned up the brightness, anything that was black stayed black. It did not go gray. So it was a really great monitor for that. So again, it had a TV only because TVs were common, but anybody who started to use it seriously obviously bought a monitor of some sort and used that. But monitors were kind of pricey.
And that kind of brings up something, Tim, I know a lot of people here obviously know the history of the QL and why Sinclair wanted to make it, but I don't know if you wanted to say something about that in your own words as to, the evolution of the Sinclair products and why he wanted to make this QL. What was his purpose for this product?
Interesting about Sir Clive was he wasn't really a computer guy. So I don't really know the reasons for the low-level reasons for why he wanted to do all this sort of stuff. I know that this was originally supposed to be a super spectrum, and he really wanted to be Z80 based, but other people said it should be 68,000 based. And it went with the 68,008 for cost reasons. So I read that a bit. You can read more about that. There's a couple of books published about, and I really have dug into why. There's been a lot of discussion in the QL forums about how the QL was great. It could have done great things if they done this and they had done that and that.
Well, I guess I
didn't really cared. I wanted it because I liked it.
Right. And ultimately, a machine falls into the hands of whoever, really enjoys using it. But, in my mind, it's just that, QL or Clive wanted to get out of the game market, right? He didn't, he wanted a more professional machine, right? He wanted something that businesses would use.
Yeah, he didn't like the fact that his legacy was a game computer. And he was competing against Commodore 64s as another game machine. And the Spectrum was a really was a big game machine in the UK. That was, most of the owners were probably in their teens, a lot of games, no one was doing serious work on it. So QL was trying to be serious, but then people complained that, well, now you made it incompatible. You can't run Spectrum games on it, and you've got rid of that's all your marketing, and it doesn't play games. So who's going to buy it? But once you bought it and you got those 4 application programs, you actually did all right. There were very few database programs that only came out years later, because Archive did quite well. and I would compare archive with DBase 2 any day. It had that same capability, and DBase 2 was really popular, and this archive was a little late to the game, but it had the same power as DBase 2. The only bad thing about archive was if you didn't close your file, you open the database file, you play with it, and if you didn't close it and turned off the system, it wouldn't write a byte to a microdrive, and then you couldn't open the file again. So it's already open, but no, it's not. And so there was ways of tweaking with the microdrive and writing that byte. And, okay, it's closed now. I can reopen. That was the only really downside to archive.
Yeah,
but it had a full programming language.
It's kind of a shame that Sinclair is the one who brought out the QL, and only because they didn't have the resources to really push it. Because this is a fantastic machine, especially put in its historical context.
Yeah.
And it was introduced a month before the Mac, and early Mac didn't have networking. Early Mac didn't have multitasking. I'm not sure about the ST when it came out. It didn't have any networking. But out of the gate, the QL had networking. It didn't really work very well initially. It had some improvements later on, but it still you could access files in other machines by just plugging them in. Not many people did, because not many people have multiple QLs. But there were some people in the UK that did use QLs for professional reasons and did all right. Again, Quill did fine. It worked, you buy the standard printer that came with it and did near letter quality. I used the QL for the last year and a half of college. When I wanted to demonstrate one program, I took this entire configuration, QL and monitor, into my professor's office to demonstrate it. He was kind of impressed a bit that what it was doing. I did have to buy extra memory because just the Pascal compiler and adding graphics capability took up more than 128K. So I bought extra memory. I could then do my final project for my bachelor's degree, and then demo it to my professor.
Wow.
So
thank you, Tim.
Yeah. The closest thing I've gotten to, the closest thing I got to a QL, right, is the industrial design when they started to put it on the Spectrum Plus, I think, or whatever. They copied that keyboard design, right, and they made it into the Spectrum 128 and all that kind of stuff.
The Plus, the 128. I'm not sure about the 3 or the 2.
Yeah, those are more Amstrad designs with the real keyboard, but but those, I think the Spectrum in the new case, right, has the same keys. It's that same industrial design that Ian made, right? It's the same thing they did with the Spectrum Next, right? He actually designed those keys and things too before he passed.
So I ran the QL as my primary machine from 86 to 98. I did everything on it.
You're a purist, man. I don't know. The only reason I really didn't get one for me was it was kind of expensive, right? It was more, especially when, at that time in my life, I couldn't, it was barely enough to support the Timex machines, let alone that thing.
I got lucky in the fact that college wasn't that terribly expensive. I had a decent job. And at the time I had I was debating, do I buy myself a hang glider or do I buy the QL?
That's right. You made the right decision.
Yes, I did have. So I did some work for a local mission sorting center, a local hang glider shop, such that if I did buy a hang glider from them, I would get free lessons to my hang one rating. I did some DBase 2 work or 3 work for them. And they're like, I really want to buy the QL. And I'm glad I did, because I ran it for a long time, still tinkering with it. If I do any programming for fun, it's usually going to be QL or ZX81 based. Again, the 26.8 was fun to play with, but it died within 6 months and no one could fix it.
Yeah.
So, and there weren't, the Sinclair community was mostly in the Midwest, maybe in Oregon. And so all the shows were in the Midwest. And so, there was really no one in the Bay Area that was really doing any repair work. I really didn't know any other user groups. So it wasn't the internet. So you don't really easily find user groups. So, so I saved my money, got the QL and used it for the last year and a half of college. And the rest is, the rest is history.
And kind of to speak to the microdrive thing, there's that guy in, I can't remember where he's at, but anyway, he makes what they call the B drive, right? And he makes a QL version of the V drive. The V drive is more for the Spectrum, but basically you replace the guts, right? It's all designed the way he made it. It's designed to fit right into where the guts are for the microdrive, and it's where the opening for the microdrive is. It's an SD slot for a full size SD card, and so you can modernize your microdrives, because they still work just like the old ones, the original ones, but now they are solid state.
Right. And so it keeps your QL looking like a QL, but you've upgraded
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I know he made an external version for the QL, right? Because like you said, they did make, I don't know if they ever made drives originally. I think they might have, but he has an external case that you can plug into the QL2 to make more, virtual microdrives.
I don't think I've seen anybody who got a hold of the external microdrives for the QL. The expansion slot is there. I don't think anybody ever used it that I ever saw. So, but for me, since what I like about all this is I can run my QL emulator, my ZX81 emulator, my Sinclair, any emulator on one single machine. I don't have to swap. I don't have to fill up my space with many monitors. I can still run on my laptop and go sit on my recliner and sit back and do all the computing I ever need to do on it. So I'm definitely, and all I really want is the software. I don't have to have the hardware experience.
Yeah,
so I collect the hardware.
I'm not like you because I don't use emulator that much. I prefer the hardware. So I have the Q68. I have about everything that was talked about during the presentation.
And there's a famous name. I don't think we've ever seen each other, but I definitely know your name. It's Francois, right?
Yeah.
I think you did Perfection, the word processor.
No, I did Paragraph.
Okay. I knew you did something with the you did it with Proforma, the other.
But your presentation was great because I must admit that the emulators are doing everything that anyone could or want for of the QL, but I like hardware, so I still have an original QL with the V drive. I have one with the gold card and the SSD drive. I have another one with the super gold card and the Aurora board, and I have the Q68. So, and all my 4 QLs are networked together. So lots of fun.
Francois, did you ever make it to any of the West Coast US shows?
Yes,
West
I
Coast,
went
East
one show in Rhode Island, and I hold my own show in Montreal at one point. I don't know
which Rhode Island show. What year do you remember?
I don't remember which one.
I think they did like 2 or 3, and I thought I went to all of them, so we might have met. But then there was also the Boston show I went to.
I think I went to 2 Rhode Island shows now that I think about it. Once with my son and once with a friend, I think. So
after I left after I left DC, went to Dayton. I never went back to any. Well, I did go. That's when I did the Rhode Island shows. So, but there were some later shows I did not attend. I did go to the Oak Ridge in '96.
I went also to the Niagara Falls show.
Yeah, I did not go to that one.
So maybe we never met. Huh?
Could be. You're one of the few that I haven't met on the North American QLers. I knew a lot of the I used to host. So in Dayton, I would host picnic, barbecues at my house to get people to come, and because I wanted to meet folks instead of just sitting at a restaurant and only meeting a few folks. But the most interesting story I have about the Rhode Island show was the first time I went to Rhode Island, my wife and I drove with our daughter, came back, long drive. Second time, I got Paul Holmgren from Indianapolis to pick me up. We drove straight all the way. He had a cooler. He had a van with a bench seat in the back so he'd sleep while I was driving. He had a cooler to make sandwiches and drinks and didn't have to stop at all for us up the Piddle and get gas. On the way back, as we're driving through New Jersey, he's like, "Oh yeah, my mother-in-law lives like a mile that way." Okay, great. We're driving in the middle of Pennsylvania. He calls his wife and says, "Hey, dear, I'm in Pennsylvania. We'll expect you home in 10 hours or whatever it was. She says, oh, by the way, my mother's had a heart attack. And she's like, oh, and he's like, so can you come pick us up and take us back to New Jersey? Okay. We get on the road and it is like 9 o'clock at night. It is thunderstorming. He's driving like a madman to get to Indianapolis, to then turn around, drop me off in Dayton, get to Indianapolis, to then turn around all the way back to New Jersey without any sleep at all.
Ugh, that's crazy.
And I'm like, hey, Paul, can I drive for a bit? I don't really want to die in Pennsylvania on this highway.
Tim,
So,
thank you.
All right, I think
so
I've had
much.
enough. I've given me an hour's worth.
Yeah. No, well, and I wanted to jump to João because he's limited for time. So João Diogo Ramos is here and he's going to tell us a little bit about some goings on with the Load CX Museum.
Hi guys, pleasure to be here with you again after a while away due to other commitments. Nevertheless, I've been talking to Johnny Red, who is part of our team, and he keeps participating, and my good friend Mark, who's also here, and everyone. So just perhaps just before I give you a quick update, I can share just two things. I've been writing down a few comments while we had this excellent presentation. And there's probably just two things that it's nice to show, and it's easier for me to share than to expect anyone to go afterwards searching for it. So do you guys see my screen, my Chrome browser? Let me just try to swap here for two things. So one thing I mentioned was this. In the museum, we have the QL and we have so there's a printer, which is basically the same as the TS2080. Which is a sQLux 1000 AS, I believe. I don't know if you can see it here in front, but so for anyone that knows the printer that Timex launched, what's the name? I'm missing the word. Sorry?
The 2040?
No, if he's talking the 80 column, it did him the 2080.
The bigger one, the 2080. Yeah. But I'm missing the word in English. So we had the 9 or 24
9 pin. Yeah,
9
pin.
That's the word. Sorry. So, and this is the same, basically, just in black of this one, which is the Timex one. And then we have I know you can see it in detail. Then we have below it, we have the sQLux original one, because these are just rebranded printers. So this was just a tiny detail. I'm no QL expert. One thing I always tell to the visitors is what Mark Kusterman also wrote, which is, so we have this famous Linus Torvalds guy that created the core of the kernel of Linux that speaks about using the QL also a lot. From what I could understand, you guys had a much bigger usage of the QL from what was described. So over here, the only relevant thing, and people were saying in the chat, oh, if Timex had picked this up, it would be interesting. Now, the fact is, Timex got away from the business with Sinclair when Amstrad joined, and that was in '86. And the QL is a machine with lots and lots of problems from '84. So there wasn't time for Timex to have that opportunity, even if they could want it or not. The only information additional that I have is that at least Timex Portugal, who did participate in the not conception, but the validation, the tests of the QL, we do have lots of paperwork from between Sinclair and Timex about testing and some certification that they were doing to the QL and all the problems they were facing. So there was some participation. One of the things I know that the guys in Portugal hated was the investment, the choice to use the microdrives, but Clive wanted to do it, and so nothing to do about it. One thing, another thing I mentioned in the chat just finally was, so the key guy for the QL in Europe was David Carolyn. David Carolyn is famous because he was hired with a job profile like something like the best engineer in the world, and he applied and got the job. And David Carolyn worked a lot, even with Timex Portugal, creating what was the TENET, the Timex Educational Network, which was that prototype of a system for computer classes. So there are lots and lots of links in between. When I first met you guys, I spoke a little bit about some of these things, at least the 10net. We are doing a lot of work to recreate it in the museum. For now, we haven't announced it, but it's moving, and there will be news this year for sure. Now, what I asked David to talk about, just two brief things. So if I go to another window here, so we'll have on the 29th of January online the third edition of the GOTY, which are the Planeta Sinclair Awards. Planeta Sinclair is a very famous Portuguese blog about all things Spectrum. They have these awards going on for 5 or 6 years, and we are basically pushing towards the direction of the Oscars of the ZX Spectrum games. So there are around 200 games being developed every year still for the Spectrum. 200 to 300 in the best years, which is crazy, coming from Eastern Europe, coming from Spain, coming from UK, Brazil, US, I don't know, honestly, I don't think. Which also, it's not so hard to understand because Spectrum was not so relevant. But so we are hosting this event. It will be at 3 o'clock London time and Lisbon time. You can be online if you want in our YouTube. The event is in Portuguese, but most of the things will be also, the main things will be written in Portuguese and English, so you'll get the idea. So if you are interested more in the gaming part, I think it's an interesting event and one that we are working a lot to make happen. Just another curiosity, another thing happening in the museum, we just launched a podcast, but it's in Portuguese, so I won't expect anyone for now to join us. We are thinking about having...
Can I ask you a quick question about the live awards?
Yep.
How is, you said it's live, how is it going to be presented? Like it's Zoom or what is it?
No, it's in
YouTube.
It will be streamed in YouTube.
Oh, YouTube.
Yeah,
okay.
in our YouTube channel. So we
Okay.
did it in the last 2 years. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see the broadcast. The first one was my first live, so it was the first experiment. The year after was a little bit better with the team already. Now this year we are doing it physically for the first time. So it will be. So we'll have different people presenting the different awards, which will be something new also. We'll have a red carpet and all those kind of things, trying to bring some glamour to the event, see how it goes. And it's a preparation for next year. Really, next year, I want to do it in a unique way. And it's funny to see that this still, everyone excited about these kind of things 40 years after the Spectrum. So it's I think very interesting to see. Then I was talking about the podcast, just out of curiosity. We will do some episodes in English because we intend to have people from abroad being interviewed. So probably I will start inviting also some of you. This is not managed by me, it's a friend of ours. It's a former Portuguese programmer. The guy created one of the first text adventures over here. And so he challenged us to have a podcast, which we accepted. We just launched the first episode, nothing special, just introducing ourselves, and now let's see where this takes us. There have been many other things happening in museum, but that's not the focus of this discussion, and I don't want to steal your time. So we'll, in one of the next sessions, we'll have time to catch up if relevant. So these were the two highlights I wanted to give to everyone.
So Jay, could you click on that last tab up there? You got it? I noticed there's the right there for the museum picture. Kind of in the first cabinet there's a silverish, looks like a Timex 1000. You see that's in the left side.
In the left side
down,
here?
Yeah, it's down by the 1500, it looks like. But is that a silver?
No, this is very... So there's a couple of strange things here. So this cabinet here is from things that came from the Timex Portugal factory. So these are all, let's say, kind of awkward things. I'll just highlight two or three very quickly. So this device over here, it's I think they call it a dice or something like that. So what is this? This is look, I'm a computer science guy, but I'm not so technically so I'm more a management guy nowadays. But what I mean is this: what does this do? This replaces the Z80 in the machine and allows you to intercept all the calls made the processor. And by connecting a VT100 terminal, you can basically debug code, which is something they couldn't because they didn't have editors of code and put breakpoints and all of that nowadays we can do easily. Back in the 80s, that was very hard to do. And so this machine came from the Timex Portugal unit, was bought by a former employee of them from the R&D team, and he gave it to the museum. We haven't tested yet because I need the VT100 terminal, which we don't have, and we didn't have the time to play with it. Regarding the 1500 that you see here, it's just a keyboard. There's a
actually no, it's not that. It's further over.
One.
Yeah, there you go. It looks like a silver 1000.
It's this came from their tool room department, which basically meant where they played with everything. So it's a TS 1000 black that was painted, because I don't know if you know, I imagine you do. They made a lot of experiments with some special paints to deal with the certification for FCC for US because of radiation. So some of these things here are experiments they did with those inks and things like that. So for example, the other one here, it's a Argentinian one, but not the one that later was sold. So it's an experiment with a label in blue and yellow, which was never used really. And the other one, like I was saying, is just a keyboard that was used to control in a soccer stadium, to control a display, a big display, and they did it with a TS 1500. So all of these are things that came from the Portuguese unit. Yes.
João, Gustavo
from Argentina, right?
Here,
yes.
He has an incredible interest in Tenet.
Okay.
So, Gustavo, shoot.
Okay. Okay. So first, thank you for this time. You can run or you can test the development tool there if you run in a serial port in a regular PC, an emulator, the BT100. This is just standard ANSI terminal. You don't need the specific BT100 terminal. Okay. You can emulate perfect. Only the escape controls need to use the same. But
okay, we'll eventually test it. It's just a matter of also of time and priority. But yes, thank you for the information. It helps.
Oh yeah, another. I don't know. This is the missing of the SpectraNet hardware. SpectraSide. Timex in US present any development equipment like mentioned is SpectraSide. Apparently, it's a mix hardware plus software, and you connect to the Timex machines, maybe the TS, and also you can debug, and also you can monitor all the programs step by step, and also see the C80 registers and connect with the development system. I don't know, maybe it's very similar like you have there, or I don't know. Where is the interface?
I don't know that thing that you are describing, so any information would be very welcome. Regarding this, just clarify one thing. This is not something developed by them. This was just some very professional hardware that they bought to use in the R&D department, not something that they developed.
It kind of looks to me like back in that day it would be like an ICE, an in-circuit emulator, or
this is an ICE, the ICE, probably digital ICE, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. The question, my first question to David was how I can get the ROM image of the Tenet in the board are you show in the museum?
But which board? Just out of curiosity, I will answer your question. But which board? I haven't showed anything about the Tenet. I mentioned it, but it's not on display here. So the story of the Tenet, which was never launched. So we knew about it in Portugal because it was referred in some literature. Stuart, who is also, I think, here, also had a brochure that he took in one visit to Portugal. So the tenet was the concept of using basically the TC2048, but it could be other machines afterwards, but using those machines and connect them in a network to use in a classroom. And that's a project that Timex Portugal tried to sell, for example, in China, in India, in many other places. We have documentation of all of that. Now,
oh yes, I see a picture on the museum.
It's still on the wall here.
Yeah,
it's
in the wall.
But there are, there is more than one version. This is the first version. So regarding this one, the ROMs exist and they were dumped already and they are okay. Regarding the second version, which was more like an interface to connect to any computer, those ones are not. We do have one prototype of it also, but the ROMs are not okay. But so based on the information that exists, we are working to rebuild it. So eventually we will release them, don't worry. We don't do anything to keep to ourselves. That's not our idea. We don't do this for commercial means. So that's not the intention, but we don't have a timeline yet to say when we will release it. But the ROMs of those things exist.
No, I would like to only to investigate and also to know the protocol that or the commands that Timex try to think on this solution. That is my objective.
I can put you in contact with the guy in the museum that is managing that that project. He's a friend of mine called Hugo.
Perfect, perfect. And,
okay.
And also, if possible, to see the version 1 of the ROM, that's great because I introduced in the method, okay? Because I only see the name. That's nothing. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's so I think I'll write my contact in the chat.
Okay.
And just drop me an email and I'll forward to Hugo and you guys can talk and check.
Okay. Please send to me and at the chat or by email or I don't know. I send to you a direct message now.
Oh, okay. Very well.
Thank you, João.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
So I'm going to stop your sharing, João.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
It's okay. Oh, cool.
I was expecting you to get control of this. Yeah, done.
And I've lost, there's my mouse. Okay. Thank you. And, you know, to your point, we need to have a longer session where you can show off more cool stuff and tell us more of your knowledge. So let's try to do that this spring, you know, in one of the Sunday sessions. I think that
I might have to make a silver 1000. That's inspiring.
Very cool. Jeff, are you ready for us?
Yes.
Cool. All right, let her rip.
Okay, just a second. I want to turn off my video for a minute so you guys don't get seasick.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's try this. Okay, so my video interface, I'm hoping that you can see that mess coming out of the back of my 2068. What I have displayed here is the output from the monitor on my 2068. And then this is the output from my video interface.
Oh, wow.
And so right now it's able to echo the display from the 2068. I'm still working on the palette right now to make sure that the colors are reasonable. I've only got 3 bits per channel, so it's going to be a compromise. And then also, sorry.
Yeah, that screen looks horrible.
Yeah, that's one reason why I wanted to go into this.
Oof.
I mean, it's mostly black.
Well, it's not what I would have liked. Sorry about this, guys.
Is that composite, or is that?
That's the monitor output from the
Okay,
composite. Yeah. Okay, and then also in there, I've included an 80 column display. There's enough memory in the FPGA so that I can maintain the Timex as well as an 80 column display. And basically what I've done is some modifications to Grant Searle's terminal that he uses for his multi-comp. So essentially this will take a subset of some VT100 codes and allow you to output 80 column video. And I've also included a TMS 9918 video display processor as part of the FPGA. And I haven't done anything with it yet, but I know that it works because I've used it in another project over the last couple of months just to check out to make sure that it'll work. So that's where the video project is sitting right now. And I did check I can actually get FPGAs. So I'll probably end up building some more FPGA boards just to verify the design. And then after that, I have another board daughter board that's going to plug onto that FPGA board that will allow me to gain access to the SD card and a serial port. And right now, this is an old version of the Raspberry Pi Pico that doesn't have Wi-Fi. I did order some that did. And ultimately, I'd like to get Wi-Fi working as well.
Wow. Wow.
So that's kind of where we're sitting right now.
Very cool. So one day we'll be able to control our Wi-Fi enabled light bulbs from our 2068s.
That would be a perfect application.
Right. It would give out and in a whole new meaning.
Someone's going to create a 2068 based clapper.
There we go.
Oh, nice idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to know that, maybe if you've got like a blog or something, the technical aspects of how you got the colors of the video, because it looks like you don't do anything internally, right? It's just a stock 2068 hardware wise. It's just your board plugs in and takes, whatever signals it needs, obviously the RGB, and I'm not sure how you're getting the bright.
Well, actually, what I'm doing is I'm snooping the bus so that anytime that the 2068 writes to the video RAM internally, I intercept all those signals and it writes to buffer RAM in the FPGA. And then the FPGA just sits in the background and converts that to a standard 640 by 480 compatible VGA signal.
Okay.
So I don't even worry about the signals coming out of the 20.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Well, it'd be interesting to see if you could do something, on a minimalistic standpoint, just for the video part. It doesn't need to be a big old that's just kind of one of the things I think would be good to, get out there, so that way you don't have to, you can hook it up to a modern display and have all the capabilities, right, that we were promised.
Chef?
Yeah.
Chef, hi, this is Gustavo. Congratulations for your board. I just only mentioned to you one of my idea regarding this project, because many years ago, I think that we can do the same that you finish, okay, now. And also to do a compatibility between 64 and 80 columns that is necessary to run CPM, for example. Maybe you can add more columns or virtual columns as you design only for scan in a high resolution output, like HDMA or something, okay? But you cannot use more memory for the TS RAM because it's fixed in 64 column by 24 lines, okay? And the rest of the column, I can think in my project to add between the IO instruction for the C80. Okay, you can address the different memory or located in the side of the scan and access this memory through the input-output ports. Okay.
Yeah, basically, in this particular application, I have a text mode 80 column peripheral that's accessed using one IO port from the Z80, and you just basically you just spit out ASCII, and it uses the VT 100 codes to set color and to move the cursor around and to do some other things. So, you know, essentially it does not use any of the 2068's memory for that 80 column mode.
Okay. No, in my project, I think that capture or intercept the write in the screen area between the chunk number 2 or chunk number for the high resolution direction 4000 or 6000, and also to create a bitmap like you have in the memory, the exact bitmap inside the FPGA.
Yes, and
yes, but this is for graphic mode. Okay.
Yeah, and you can do that with this peripheral. It has 16K of its own memory, so that whenever you write to video memory in the 2068, it just outputs it. So you can do whatever this 2068 can do, my FPGA video can do, plus I've incorporated ULA plus capability in that. So you have extra palette commands. And so essentially, as it sits right now, it's basically a 2068 video output with better quality, along with an 80 column display.
Oh, that's great.
Great, congratulations.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome, Jeff. That's really cool. I wish I knew how to do that kind of stuff, but I'll let you do it.
And it looks like like you said, you can probably get the FPGAs now. It's the supply chain is kind of breaking loose.
Well, yeah, and this particular FPGA, there's like 58,000 of them at DigiKey. So
okay.
If DigiKey has them, generally they're available.
Yeah, right. Wow. Very cool. All right. Well, does anybody else want to jump in? Tell us what you've been up to, because I see a whole bunch of names of people who've been here and have been away for a little bit, like Andy.
Well, something we haven't done. Is there anyone here who's never attended one of these meetings before?
Francois.
Maybe,
Francois is new to us.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself?
So Francois, tell us.
No, it's my second meeting.
Oh, is it? Okay. You snuck in on an earlier one then, huh?
I think I was there during the first ever meeting and this one. So
okay.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time, yeah. So tell us about yourself and what's your Sinclair history?
Well, I started like everybody else with the not the Timex 1000, but a real ZX 81 modified, factory modified to run in America. There were a few of those. So I got that first. Then a few years later, I got the 2068. But my main goal was to program the beats, whatever computer it was. So as soon as the QL was available, I switched to that. And it's true that I've been using my QL much more than my 2068, for example. So this is the reason why I wanted to be here today to listen to Tim's presentation. So, and I've continued using my QL up to these days. Every time I want to test something quickly, an algorithm, I'll do it on the QL, because I know it. I know how to program it either in BASIC or in C or in assembly. So, and I don't really do programming on Mac or PC. So I do that on my QL when I have time. So that's it.
Very cool. Thank you for joining us, Francois. And you're in, I think you said you were in Montreal, right?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Wow. I used to live, gosh, I forgot how far south it is. I used to live in Plattsburgh, which is directly south of you. Plattsburgh,
Yep.
New York. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
I got one thing real quick here. I think I got to mute.
Oh, okay. I thought Tim was going to tell us something.
I am the right machine here.
Oh, all right. This is the dead air I was talking about. That we'll be able to cut out. So while we're waiting for Tim, Andy Hradesky.
Actually, sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
Right, so I'm holding up here. This is a book called Endless Loop. It's a history of BASIC. It's actually pretty good.
I'm spotlighting you now.
There you go.
Yeah, I've seen this. I think I've seen this on Amazon.
Yeah, it's actually, I really enjoyed it. I sat down, it took me like 2 or 3 days to go through it pretty straight. So a really enjoyable read if you're interested in BASIC.
Now, does that go like back, to the source there of Dartmouth?
Yeah, all the way back to Dartmouth. It goes into great detail about Dartmouth. Talks about Sinclair's a bit in passing, but talks about Microsoft. But yeah, it really goes back to the very early days.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I read that book too a few years ago when it was new, and I enjoyed it. It was good. It was good. Mine has a slightly different cover, but it's
All right. Well, as you alluded to earlier, Adam, I'll give a little update on the adventures in tape preservation. So I got one of these tiny little Windows boxes, and it's literally, like 5.5 inches square and about 2 inches thick, and it's bolted onto the back of my monitor right now. It has a headphone jack on it, but it didn't have an audio jack. So as it turns out, I had this little converter that I bought for a Pi a few years back, but it's a USB audio in and out, and I stuck that in. And I tried first to use that little Walkman-like tape player that has USB out, and it played one tape, and then it just sort of gave up the ghost and would not. It always wanted to go in the wrong direction. I could not quite figure out what was wrong with it. So I went old school and busted out my shoebox size style tape player, and plugged it in. And so I've been using Audacity, and what I do is fire up Audacity, and Audacity has an ability to monitor the tape level. So I would, set that on monitor mode and play the tape a little bit, so that it was peaking out at about -6 decibels, because you don't have a whole lot of headroom when you're doing digital recording. So I'd get a nice audio level, and then I'd rewind the tape and record the entire thing or at least until the signal stopped, into Audacity. And I would save that as a WAV file. And I did that for 2 or 3 tapes. Then I got curious about what was on them. So I downloaded, I had to install Python on my Windows box, and I downloaded TZX Tools, I think it's called, which is written in Python. And it's kind of hit or miss in terms of how well it picks up the signal and converts it to stuff. So like one tape, it worked just fine, converted a bunch of things, without a problem. And then other tapes, it just didn't work. So
are you talking about the CATS tapes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, those are the first ones I kind of futzed around with. So then I fired up Fuse and discovered that Fuse can open a WAV file, and you can just load directly from a WAV file in Fuse. I was like, awesome. And Fuse seems to be better at, decoding those WAV files in some cases than the TZX tools. And it's cool because you can just type in load quotes and it'll load the next thing, right? And you just keep doing this, and it's when it gets to the last one, it just loops back to the beginning and starts loading the first one again, whatever the first thing is, on that virtual tape. And so Adam had posted a couple interesting graphics demos from one of those tapes, and coincidentally, I had loaded one off of the exact same, WAV file, and I did a little screen capture and posted that to YouTube.
Yeah, that was really, did you just capture it from Infuse and export it as a file, or how did you do that? By the way?
Yeah. So Fuse has, one of the commands is to record a movie, and it records it in its own format. But if you have Fuse utils, there's a little command that you type in that converts it to, I think that it calls it QuickTime, but it turns it into an MP4 file, which is QuickTime. Or maybe it says it's YouTube, whatever, regardless. It converts it into something that's not, crazy. And then I just edited it in iMovie and then uploaded it to YouTube. So one of the things I want to do is take all those little graphics demos off of that tape and string them together into one short little video and put that up as a demo. So the tapes come largely from two people: Bob Swoger, who was really, really active in the Chicago area Timex Sinclair user group for decades, literally, and who was one of the people responsible for the Sir Clive Alive newsletter that was published for 12 years up until about 2013. And the other was a guy named Dick, I might be mispronouncing it, Cultice, Cultice. And he was with the Sinclair Milwaukee users group, SMUG. And so one of the things that I recovered from one of Dick's tapes was this registration form for signing up to be a member of the SMUG user group and expressing your interest. And he had written it he typed it up in TazWord 2. And apparently he had modified that version of TazWord for, I think, his whatever issue his printer had with line feeds or form feeds or something. And Dick also typed in a lot of programs that have to do with materials engineering, things like beam strength and other mechanical engineering things that I don't quite understand, but at least I recognized. Dick had a 1000, and one of the things that I noticed, one of the cool things about Audacity is you see the waveform as it's going across, right? And one of the things that I've noticed about Dick's 1000 is that the audio output has I think a 60 hertz ripple on it. So in addition to the waveform, it also goes up and down. And that makes for converting difficult. Some of the things load in 81, which is another emulator. Some of them don't.
I think there are tools to help take that kind of ripple out.
Well, and what I'm thinking actually is I'm just going to bust out my real 1000 and connect up my tape player to it, because I've got a ZX Spand. I've got one of those little doojiggers that plugs onto the back with an SD card. And I'm thinking I'll just record directly from the tape into the 1000 and then save to the SD card, and maybe that'll do the trick. I'm hoping that that hardware will take care of the issue in a way that Audacity and the emulators can't. So I would show you. I bought these big plastic bins that you can get at like Home Depot with the flip top doors, right? I have 1.5 of those full of cassette tapes. Literally hundreds and hundreds of tapes.
None of them are labeled, right? Isn't that what you said?
Some of them are labeled. Some of them are
them
labeled.
are labeled.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there'll be a little label on tape, but there's none of them have like, nice typed out directory of, here's the things that are on this tape, especially not the CATS tapes.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of interesting last weekend when I was messing around with the CATS tape. I think it was number 8. They and I loaded every single program on there, and there was like 9 or 10 of them or whatever.
Yeah.
And since I had no idea what was on them, it was like this little discovery mission. I was just going, what's this one going to be? And then I loaded up, and most of them were utilities. There was got that graphic demo, which is pretty cool. And
did you find the 3D print program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it was pretty fun. It was like my wife went out of town and for a night and a half, and so I was like, what am I going to do? And Ryan came over that evening and showed him a couple of things, and yeah.
Speaking of Ryan should enter some of his games into the Planet Sinclair contest next year, I think. Ryan, what do you say?
Okay, but now you're gonna make me want to work on them.
That's right. Look, someone's got to represent the U.S.
No pressure, Ryan. No pressure, but hurry up.
You've got 364 days.
I was going to say, David, that yeah, you found out what I found with the Fuse emulator was, you can have. I mean, because of the well, at least for the Fuse, of course, is a Spectrum only.
Yeah.
And so it's not doing 81 stuff.
Right.
And so that load save mechanism uses the frequency method, right?
That I don't know. I will say that 81 also lets you load a WAV file, and it gives you you can open a little dialog box with these 2 sliders, one of which controls the amplitude, how loud the signal is, and the other one I think lets you set the DC offset or something, because you can then move that signal up or down, and I think increase the loading reliability. But one of the, to me, I think that the problem that I'm experiencing is that the tape recorder that Dick used, he had automatic gain control turned on, and so what would happen is that the signal would start out really loud and then drop, because it was expecting a quiet signal, and so it would compress that signal. And then the other thing was, I think related to the automatic gain control, is with 1000, the way the 1000 saves programs, there's 2 kinds of sort of signal groupings that you can expect to see. One of which is 4 peaks, of a sinusoid wave, and the other one is 9 peaks. And with a bunch of Dick's tapes, those 9 peaks will start out good, but they drop down, and by the 8th or 9th, it's like right at that line. And if you boost it to try to get that 8th and 9th above the line, you're getting this initial swing that's not really a peak, but it's like this internal voltage swing comes above the line.
Yeah, so what I meant is that the ZX81, that's the ZX81's tape format saving.
Yes.
Okay, and the Spectrum time or 2068 method was a pulse length frequency style.
Yeah, it's much nicer.
And it's less sensitive to volume. But sometimes I found that even though you'll get some of those, but it is ultimately going to need it above some level.
Yeah.
Or at least a relative. And I found I've gone in and you'll see the long peaks and the short peaks essentially.
Yep.
For 2068 program. And you'll get the same kind of thing, of course, with level fading. And so sometimes I'll go in and basically I'm just zooming in on the waveform and then look for these little empty, very narrow empty pieces. And sometimes the volume will just have this dip. I go in there and sure enough find that, okay, those peaks have faded a little bit there, and then just you can go in and select that part.
Mm-hmm.
And well, usually it ramps, so you have to select some of it and you normalize that to a different level.
Yeah.
Until you get them up, and you have to select carefully the sample points so you don't get these discontinuities. You can get some practice with it, and then you can bring those back up, and sometimes that can get you through. At least for me, I'll have just these little dropouts, but I haven't experienced the one where you've got the maybe a 60 hertz.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll point one out to you, Ryan. I'll because I think I uploaded them to the Google Drive folder that I created, which reminds me, I created a Google Drive folder where we can all do whatever, share documents, upload things. You know, I mean, it's limited by my current Google Drive limits, which are, I think I have about 7 gig used, so there's about 7 gig free. And I sent out invites to, you know, a couple folks. And if you want to, you know, get in there and like download some of those tape images that I've made, send me a note through the groups.io list, and I'll add you to the Google Drive folder as an editor. I didn't want to open it to the world because I don't want, you know, I don't want to lose all the stuff that put in there. But I figured, you know, it'd be good for us to have a common space that we could do stuff before finally deciding, okay, this is ready to be sent up to archive.org. That's my report.
David, before it gets too late here or too much later, you know, I bought a bunch of stuff from your Undertone site just recently, right? I think you kind of saw that.
Yep.
I didn't get any, I sent you an email, but I never got a reply back to it. I don't know, maybe you didn't see it, or I didn't send it to the right one, but, or maybe it got stuck in your junk folder. I don't know. I know how that can happen.
But you know what? But you're the second person to say that you didn't get a reply, and I did send it. You sent me a long email. I remember reading that.
It's pretty long because it basically goes through everything I bought from you. You know, my plans for those things. And I noticed you sent me something that, you know, wasn't on the list. It looks like this is a this is a little I don't have a schematic for it, and I don't know.
I'm gonna,
you know, it has certain stuff populated on it already.
What is that?
But
what is that? I just like,
it's an RY. It's you know, I don't know where he got this, but it's a little video board, right? That takes the well, I assume it would take the TS268s, you know, BY, RY, and Y outputs from the SCLD and convert it into, well, I guess it's another one of these mini DIN 9 things. So I guess it goes to the Sega Genesis converter thing.
Yep.
Which is cool, but I'd like to see if I could, you know, maybe use this just to go RGB straight out. But I need the rest of the BOM here, all these resistors and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the values. They're not written on here. Looks like a cool board. I don't know if this is your design or.
So Carl, look in it went to your Hotmail account, right? Because I think that's where you emailed me from.
I did.
Look in maybe your spam folder.
If I did, it's gone because I usually empty that out every day or two.
Okay, I'm going to forward this to you again. Do you have?
But anyway, yeah, the schematic for this. The other thing is, you know, on your Spectrum board that I got from you, because I saw Ryan had one of these, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I guess this is the, you know, you kind of copied what's his name's
Don.
You're right. And this has a video output on it, and I noticed, okay, well, it doesn't have the 1881.
Yep.
Right, so you're not really doing anything with the sync. So it'd be nice to have the schematic for that. I mean, it's pretty simple. I probably could just kind of reverse engineer it really quick, but obviously you've got a schematic for this because you had to make the board.
So in the email that I wrote you, which I've forwarded to you again.
Yes, I see that.
Oh, good. Okay, so in the email, I told you about this little board and about how that it does the YUV to RGB, and that I need to get you the BOM and the schematic, both of which are in easy EDA. So I will add you to that, and you'll get an email from them, and I'll add you to the schematic for the twister so that you can see what happens there. But as you point out, it pulls the composite signal, and
straight from
most Sega to RGB converters work just fine with that composite signal.
Because I mean, I've looked on your Undertone site, and I actually got into your EDA, some of your public shared files because of this, right? So this is kind of a simplified version because you had more before. You used an analog devices where you took the RGB in, and right. So you've kind of simplified these things over time, and that's fine. But the reason for these things, is like I said, I'm woefully behind with Adam's. I've got his Amiga monitor, and I wanted to do direct RGB into that thing. I know we kind of talked about this in some emails, but and it takes, I don't know what it's going to take. I know it takes the RGB. It can take digital or analog RGB. You can switch between the two. Obviously, the Timex is a digital RGB signal, I believe. I don't think it's an analog one, right?
Right, digital, yeah.
And what I don't know is what kind of sync it's going to really take to be able to get a good picture on there, right? So that's kind of where I need to, I've got the mini DIN connectors now. I had a big old thing with Amazon where they kept sending me the wrong ones. They were 9-pin mini DINs, but they're a little different than this, right? They're a different orientation or something. But anyway, I was ordering the right ones, but they kept sending me the wrong ones. And I would hey, this is the wrong one. And they didn't want the other one back. They would just send me another one, which was the same one that I just got. So it's like, guys, your inventory's messed up or something. You keep sending me the wrong one. Anyway, and then obviously the keyboards, I guess you gave me keycaps because obviously in your description, you don't, you say you don't send them with keycaps.
I had already populated them with keycaps, and I figured, you could play with them.
And I had a question. You might have answered in the email, but why did you offset these shift buttons?
I did answer it in the email. So the issue is I don't have an open. When you peel off this part,
right, the overlay, right,
you'll discover that that there's a little notch on both sides. But actually that board fits perfectly into the space inside there, right? In order to get a reasonably sized shift key, I had to shift it down just a little bit in order to get it to fit in that space. And I've got another design that uses a much smaller shift key, but it's a much smaller, but it does bring it up, but it uses a much smaller shift key. And I haven't done the so that thing is actually 3 circuit boards. There's the plate that the keys go into, right? Then there's the circuit board, and then there's a black plate that goes on top that, and those are all just circuit boards. And so I haven't done the plate that the keys go into yet. I did the bottom board of what you're holding. And I need to do the next level up and then the next layer up. And then we'd have one where the shift keys are in line with the rest of the keyboard.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm sure I'll see it when I pull it. But like I said, one of these I want to actually kind of go to a 1000. I'm getting ready to buy the Hammond cases. They're little sloped instrument cases, similar to what they had back in the 80s, right? And the keyboard's already, your board's already set up for it. I mean, granted, this is a 2068 connector, but easily adaptable to a 1000. And because this will be a
top plate, you can use that top plate to trace the design in the Hammond for what you want to cut out.
So I could cut out, so then I would be able to just stick it through, and then obviously the other one I might actually take a 2068 and use it as intended and convert it to, because I know these keycaps are they're probably like half the height of the other one that you sent. The other ones are kind of like full height keys, right?
Yep.
So this one might,
yeah,
these might actually be better in the 2068.
That was the whole idea with the newer half heights. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I appreciate all that. That's for sure. So,
and I forgot to stick one of these little things in your box. I'm gonna have to send it to you separately. It's tiny, but it's a little keychain
right
thing of the 2068. So
nice.
Again, I think I can just get these little tiny padded envelopes to put these in and send them for like 50 cents or something. So if
something else to put on the merch site.
If any of you would like one of these things, just drop me a little line, and yeah, I'll put it up. It'll be like $1 with the shipping. I gotta go find some tiny envelopes.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, what was the other thing that you sent me?
So I sent you also I believe I sent you the video board without.
Yeah, the cartridges. I was
connector.
thinking. Right.
So you could do internal if you wanted to.
Okay, I see.
That was the goal. And also, I don't think I soldered the mini DIN to that one.
Right, it's loose. That's fine.
Yeah. So you could do it internally if you wanted, for Adam, who's no longer here. And by the way, since we've gone over, we'll go at least until 4:30. I do have to talk to a friend of mine at 5, but for anybody else who wants to hang out and jump in.
Well, the other thing, since Ryan is on, and we were kind of talking amongst the Albuquerque group, to get to, I guess the object is, and even Stuart, sent me some parts and stuff to kind of help this along.
Yeah,
is to get Adam a 1000, and Ryan kind of brought up the point that he wanted to kind of do a project that we could actually do together. So I was kind of like, do you want to do that? Like soldering and all that kind of, swapping out the guts of the modulator and everything. Well, yeah. Well, sure. I know.
Ryan's got a soldering iron.
Go.
So, I mean, we could do that, I guess, if you want. It's just, I don't know how we would be completing
or is this how you hold it? I forgot.
Yeah, try to do that when it's on and you'll learn really quick. But, because I know you have the 2, right? And obviously the one that has the bad keyboard that needs to be replaced anyway.
Well, all of them do.
I mean, that one for sure, because they cut the S out. So it's dead in the water. That ain't going to work no matter what.
And I think, and I said, well, my original thought was, hey, I'll take that one and I'll just go crazy with it. Like maybe I don't know. I didn't know about this keyboard. I was trying to follow what that keyboard. That's interesting.
What's that?
Like doing that old school of like, get a keyboard, put it in the case and put the board in the case.
Well, so is Joe still here? Yeah, Joe's your man on this, because Joe's actually done the 99 4A to 1000 conversion, which is really the way to go for the 1000, in my opinion. Of course, you'd have to find one.
Oh well.
And the 99 4A community would be up in arms about doing
there's
that.
Plenty of those. Who's going to use them?
Yeah, and you have to get the right keyboard too, because they made like 3 different designs, and that Mitsumi one is you couldn't adapt that because it's got a PCB with all the traces are on it. So you wouldn't. Well, I guess you could take it off and cut the traces and rewire it somehow, but it wouldn't be as elegant as the black ones, right? Which actually had keys, physical keys. That's why I got David's, because these things are, I mean, they're nice keyboards. I mean, I don't really think too many people know about them. I mean, I kind of, I know he talked about it at one point in time when he had his in the 2068, but I mean, that's not really a big, you don't really advertise it much. So I don't know. I don't know how many of those you've sold. Probably, Not very many, I would imagine. Yeah. So
I think about 5 or 6. I just don't. Right. I mean, I did it for myself largely.
Right.
You know, as an exercise in could this be done, and then I was like, oh well, you know, maybe 1 or 2 people, and then surprisingly 1 or 2 people have been interested in them, and I every time, you know, someone says, do you have one? I'm like, are you kidding? You really want one? Okay.
So yeah, I apologize for getting the 2 that you had, but yeah, I have 2 different purposes for them. But yeah, so that's
cool.
So yeah, I don't know what we wanted to do to get Adam. You know, I guess if Adam's gone, that's fine. But you wanted to go hog wild with one, you said, Ryan. You know, I don't know what you wanted to do, and I kind of wanted Adam's input because I don't know if he wants a tactile keyboard because Stuart sent me a few of those. Or do we want to build maybe 2 of them with a regular membrane and 1 with the tactile, and then he can decide which one he wants? I don't know.
Yeah, I had a membrane and a tactile. I've not done. Originally was for my original one, and then found about the micro switch one, and then got that, but I haven't done anything with it. I recently, when I went in to fix my old composite mod, I had to go at doing cutting the
ribbon,
keyboard tails,
the keyboard. What do you call them? The membrane connector.
Yeah, I call them the keyboard tails. You cut them back, right?
And that seemed to work, but by the time I got that back in, because it's very hard to push that rope back in, and there seemed to be I think I might have an intermittent thing, but that could have been because when I peeled off that old rubber dome add-on, might have messed up my original keyboard, you know, on the top. But it mostly works.
I discovered this week that JST has a 0 insertion force connector. Series. They have one that's vertical, like the one perpendicular to the board, like the one in the 2 to 5 and 8 pins in the Timex ZX81. They also have a horizontal one, and there's 0 insertion force. But I went to order them, and I cannot find a distributor in the United States that has them. It's like 43-week back order from DigiKey. RS Components in the UK has stock. So I'm just trying to figure out the easiest way for me to order them and get them shipped from the UK. But I'm dying to try them because for people who repair an old ZX81 membrane, it's certainly a lot easier if they could, you know, put a ZIF socket in place of the current socket. I'm just curious, and I have some new projects. I personally find that if I want to reinsert a membrane in those, I usually get some thin double sticky tape, and I just find a piece of plastic from a food container, you know, like they ship blueberries in or something. And I cut a stiffener and I glue that to the membrane, the keyboard, and that makes it stiff. And then you can put it in there.
So
the other,
what you have just described is what they did, what Timex did with the 2068 jumper, which is really short. It's only about 3 inches long, and it has just like you were saying, it has a little stiffener at each end.
Yeah, there are certainly companies who make flexible cables who offer stiff connectors on them. I've, you know, stiffeners as part of it, but I've never been able to source a cable like that other than custom making a run. I've never seen one on that would work, you know, on a 2.5 mil. It's usually the smaller connectors. I mean, certainly if you ever put a flexible connector inside of a laptop, you know how tight those spacings are. And those connectors, even though they're going into zero insertion force context, they usually do have stiffener on them.
Yeah. And the other thing I've seen some people do, or there was a suggestion, is that once you open the machine, is you put like a stiff tape, maybe like packing tape, on the whole tail, right? That way, because really what happens is when you flex it, that's when it breaks, right? That's the straight parts don't really break. So if you can put something on there that stiffens the whole tail, so that when you flex it, it has some more, you're not flexing it, and that the whole force of the flex is on right. So now you've got something that's stiff, like a piece of packing tape, or I mean, it still needs to bend. It can't be rigid, because obviously when you put it in there, it needs to bend. But you can just make it stiffer, right? Than the factory. The factory ones, which are, I don't know, made out of that weird material. I know the new ones that they make, it's different. It's a plastic material. It's not the membrane material on the original membranes, right? Which is the clear. I mean, if you look at the new membranes that they make, it's different. They don't use the same process there. I mean, the keyboard looks the same, but the material that comes out of it is like a green see-through plastic, right? It's not that Sinclair design, whatever the material is there.
Probably, the plastic materials have probably come made some advances in 35 years.
Yes, and I'm sure that's how it goes inside too. So, and I noticed people have said that sometimes they don't like the feel of the newer keyboards because they're not as sensitive, right, as the original membranes. They say the original ones are more sensitive, where you can just barely tap it and it'll register, and the other ones you kind of have to push down and make sure that you push the key, which I don't have a new one to try. I just have the ones that you sent, which are originals. So, and I do remember the original ones, which they're very sensitive to me if I recall right. You don't have to push a lot harder on them. You just basically touch it, right, and it registers it on the screen.
Yeah, I've got both, and you're exactly right. The originals are quite easier to type on, and the other ones you have to put a bit of pressure on.
Okay.
I use Captain tape either side of the. There's two flaps, and I put Captain tape with 4 layers all up. Yeah. And that's
that's what I heard, is that some people will stiffen the tails, right, with Kapton tape or something like that, so that it's easier to manipulate them, and they won't bend as easy and crack. So, but the zero insertion force, sockets would be nice too. That way you don't have to because a lot of times I'll get a needle nose pliers, right? That way I can grab a big chunk of the connector and just force it in there, and that way it can't flex, right? And so that kind of works too. But
most of the time.
all these little hidden tricks and tips to get the tails back in there.
When I do the Captain tape, the side that doesn't have the contacts, I run that right the way to the end, so that then if you do apply pressure, you don't crack that last.
Right. Sort of that's a good idea. That's too bad we don't have some Kapton tape that's already pre-cut, but it's easy enough to make a template, I guess, and do that.
Cool. Well, guys, it's almost 4:30. Has anybody got any last minute things they want to chat about?
You don't have any silver ZX81 cases, Stuart, right? Just kidding. No, I saw that.
Very few. It's principally ZX81 from
right.
cases.
I just saw that silver one, and I was like, that looks pretty interesting. That looks cool.
I only had a couple. I gave Ingo got one. I haven't heard from him. His brother's still thinking of working on a mold for that. We'll see.
My New Zealand ZX81 is sort of like a hybrid. It's got the silver paint on the inside, but it's sort of the New Zealand sort of frequency, not it's PAL, you know, the UHF, but with PAL UHF. So
okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, what I was saying is the silver outside. So instead of being a black, it would actually be a silver one, like the 2068 is silver.
You'd have spare paint from your 2040.
Yeah, well, I did the 2040, so I should be able to do the 1000. And since I got to change the keyboard out, then I can pull it off and clean it, and don't have to mask the keyboard off. So
and then you'll be fully FCC compliant.
I thought of something for a future meeting.
Yeah.
I told you before that when I bought my kits, one of those boxes was not kits. They were all assembled. And we were speculating as to whether when I open them, the keyboards are going to be brittle and have broken or not. So I think I should do that live at one of the future meetings as like a review.
An unboxing?
They all get an unboxing of something that has not been out of the box since sometime in the 80s. And we'll see if they're all broken or they all work.
Yeah. I speculate they'll be fine, but
yes, someone should start a pool to predict how many of those keyboard cables are going to be bad.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out a way to not need to depend on having a channel 33. I don't have any way to see if the video is working. So without opening them, but well, actually I'm going to open one to spec the keyboard. So we'll figure out if the video is working, but yeah.
My theory is it's the heat from the regulator that deteriorates the plastic. And that's why your ones are fine. They're not been,
well, I think
overly hot inside the.
Yeah, I think if they're sealed originally and they're not flexed, they'll probably be fine. It's when you open it and you flex it after 40 years, that thing's going to crack pretty, more than likely. So not to say that the whole tail won't be bad. Like I said, you could probably put Kapton tape on what's left, cut off the bad part, and then you might be fine.
Okay, well, we'll find out maybe in 2 weeks. I'll save it for the meeting. We'll open a couple live.
There you go.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. It's been good. I'll cut out the dead air and it'll probably cut down 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was a good meeting. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And Tim already bailed on us, so I can't thank him again. But thank you, Tim, when you see this. All right. Have a good weekend, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye-bye.